Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Do we have some stuff to talk about today? We got a modern day duel going on, ladies and gentlemen, between none other than Donald Trump and, gosh, the owner of Fox News and the Wall Street Journal. Wait to hear about this. Meanwhile, disaster in Hanoi.
Good morning, Vietnam! Hey, this is not a test. This is rock and roll.
Yeah, I got to go watch that movie again. Anyway, our president, let's just say, wasn't his best, was living up to all those polls that say he's just too old for the job. There in Vietnam over the weekend. I'm going to share some excerpts that you probably don't want to see, but you need to see. And you're going to understand now why the Democrats are so darn nervous about this guy running for president. And how about the shot heard around the world? The guy who just won the U.S. Open did so, this is great, on the Moderna shot. It was like the shot of the day, sponsored by Moderna. Well, guess what? He won the whole thing. He's the guy that would never take the vaccine. By the way, breaking news, new vaccine just out. We're going to get into all of it. Welcome to the program, everyone, to the live edition of the Trish Regan Show. I'm Trish. I'm here looking at all your comments, and we're going to get to all of them towards the end of the show. We got a lot to cover today. We're brought to you in part by LegacyPMInvestments.com, 1-866-589-0560. All right, first off, shall we talk about this modern day duel? Donald Trump saying, I hereby challenge you, Rupert Murdoch, and your little sons, and all your editors over at the Wall Street Journal, and let's throw in Biden too, to a mental acuity test. You see, this whole thing is coming about because Donald Trump wasn't happy about the Wall Street Journal, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who does own Fox News, is a majority shareholder, and his sons, of course. It came about because the Wall Street Journal asked in a poll about Donald Trump's basically mental health. They kind of had to ask it in fairness to the Wall Street Journal because, well, they were asking about Joe Biden's. And actually, the poll results were disastrous, absolutely, positively disastrous for Joe Biden. But Donald Trump did not waste this opportunity to take a shot at Rupert Murdoch, to take a shot at the Murdoch boys, to take a shot at Fox News, basically saying, they're all globalists. They don't like me. They didn't get their candidate that they wanted in. That would have been DeSantis, of course. And so now, they're kind of bitter and they're putting out what he calls, quote, fake polls like this. I will say again, the poll was pretty darn accurate when it came to Joe Biden. But Donald Trump got a little sensitive about it. I get it. But wait till you see what people are saying about Biden. I mean, that was, maybe I'm too glass half full. We can talk about the Murdochs being globalists and the whole bit and Fox News going downhill, which it has. But let's just go, first of all, to this poll. If you can see it, it says, question, is Joe Biden too old to run for president? So you kind of have to ask the same question, right, about Donald Trump. Even though, he doesn't want to hear that. But look at his scores. Hey, you know what? He's doing way better. Like, without a doubt, better than Joe Biden. I mean, the bar's low. The bar's low, as you're going to see in Vietnam in just a second. But I would say that this was some pretty good scoring. I mean, he came out light years ahead of Joe Biden on like everything. It really is scaring the living daylights, I kid you not, out of Democrats right now. It's why they're talking about Michelle Obama. Okay, now we're all scared, right? I'm going to get to that in a second. But anyway, they asked, is he too old to run for president? Is he mentally up for the job? Look at Trump way outscores Biden because, yes, like, I would say they're both up there in age, right? But Biden is older and Biden is that much more frail. And granted, Biden has never been a rocket scientist. And he's always kind of said stupid stuff. And he's always kind of carried a grudge. And I've heard this from Democrat sources that actually really helped him in his campaign, wanted him to win. They're like, this is a guy that can be really bitter and carries a grudge. So he's not necessarily like a really nice guy or anything, but he's never been sharp, okay? Just never, ever been sharp. So let's go on. These were the two questions, as I point out. These were the questions that really irritated Donald Trump. But the good news is he's one, way more mentally fit as far as the public is concerned, and way younger and more able to do the job. But I get a kick out of him taking aim at the Murdochs because, hey, why not? Look, the Murdochs have not been exactly a friend to Donald Trump. Not that they need to be, right? It's not their job. Their job, see, that's how you know it's a live show. Their job is to sell newspapers and to, get people watching their television shows and sell advertising, this, that, and the other. But I would say that there's been a particular sort of kind of hatred directed at Donald Trump. And as a result, they don't want him to win. I mean, he is not, quote unquote, controllable. And so all of the establishment players within the media circles and even within the deep state circles and within the sort of global environment, nobody wants him to win, right? Because he's going to call everything out. He's not going to play by the same set of rules and, maybe doesn't have the same interests as all those other guys. And so he took this opportunity to say, I hereby challenge you. You're waiting for the duel, right? I hereby challenge you. Rupert Murdoch and Sons, Biden, Wall Street Journal heads to acuity tests. By the way, I actually think that Donald Trump would probably win those. I mean, Rupert's up there. What is he, 93 years old? Forgive me. Is it 92? I think we put it in the title, so I'll have to go back and check. But he's up there. I think he's still sharp. That's what I've heard. I used to work at Fox, so I'd occasionally ride with him in the elevator. He's up to here on me. I'm about 5'7". So I don't know, maybe he's here. Anyway, he's small, so that makes him seem older, and he lacks hair, so that also makes him seem older. But I'm told that he's with it on the news cycle and that he's very involved and would actually be texting, the head of news and the second in command all the time with stories and ideas. So my intelligence, and again, I've never worked with him directly, but my intelligence is that he was very, very involved in the coverage of the news. Actually, that's probably in part what came back to haunt him, right? And the whole Dominion thing, having to pay nearly $800 million, and then probably came back to haunt him again in Smartmatic. I'm sure they didn't want some of that stuff to come out. But anyway, Rupert Murdoch is likely pretty decently on it, even though he's that old. Now, Donald Trump brings up something else, which is important and relevant. And he basically says, look, you guys have ruined the Wall Street Journal and you've ruined Fox. These entities are sort of shadows of themselves. Let me get the direct exact words for you, because that's sort of me paraphrasing. But I thought that was rather telling, a rather telling thing, because that in fact is indeed true. And that's, it gets back to what I've said all along. It's because they don't have decent management over at Fox News. And Wall Street Journal, I don't know. Actually, you know what? I think the Wall Street Journal is decent. Occasionally, they kind of surprise me with their own biases, which are pretty obvious at times. But for the most part, it's an okay paper. I think if you really want financial news, you probably go to the FT over in London. And the newspaper print doesn't really get on your hands. It's that pale pink paper. So if you're really into wanting to read about financial news, go to the FT. I don't really get it. Wall Street Journal's kind of become quasi New York Post. So it's not as sophisticated as it once was. So maybe that's what Donald Trump means. I mean, they kind of have ruined what the paper was. I would actually agree with that to a certain extent. It had a little bit more sophistication to it previously, prior to Murdoch's involvement. He's a tabloid guy, right? That's what he grew up on. That's his thing. He likes gossip. I'll tell you a funny story. I was actually once doing an interview with some families. It's not a funny story, actually. It's a sad story. Whose family members were being held hostage in Venezuela. The good news is all their family members got out, but these were Americans who had their family members as hostages in Venezuela. And there was news on Jeff Bezos and his, now wife, I guess, that had just broken. And here I am, I'm sitting there with these 12 family members. And in my ear, I have the producer saying, you got to go to the Jeff Bezos news. I was about to say noise, because that's what it is. It's noise. Who cares about Jeff Bezos and his girlfriend, who used to be some kind of LA TV news anchor? I don't know. I don't care. I'm sitting here doing a really emotional interview with these victims, right? These families who have lost their loved ones in Venezuela. And all I can hear is Rupert wants to go and do this tabloid, Jeff Bezos being seen with this chickie like that. It was just, and I had to do it. Like, I was like, this is the most awkward transition of my entire career. And I feel horrendous for these family members that are here. So when I say the Wall Street Journal has gone downhill, or Donald Trump says the Wall Street Journal has gone downhill, I don't disagree with him. It has gone downhill. And I encourage you to look at the FT if you want real financial news. Anyway, I'm going to get the exact same. I want to make sure I'm completely accurate and fair to what he indeed actually said. But he issued a whole bunch of statements there on Truth Social. And again, challenging Biden, challenging Rupert Murdoch to an acuity test. He did point out that he was the only one last time around that agreed to take it. And he's like, look, I passed it with flying colors. He said, a few years ago, I was the only one to agree to a mental acuity test, and I aced it. He went on to say, now the globalists at Fox and the Wall Street Journal have failed to push their third-tier candidate to success. They do this. Well, I hereby challenge Rupert Murdoch and Sons Biden Wall Street Journal heads to acuity tests. I will name the place and the test, and it will be a tough one. Nobody will come close, even close to me. We can also throw some physical activity into it. Okay. Because it's a chance for him to he won like some golf thing recently. He goes on to say, I just won the senior club championship at a big golf club with many very good players. To do so, you need strength, accuracy, touch, and above all, mental toughness. Ask Brett Baer over at Fox, a very good golfer. The Wall Street Journal and Fox are damaged goods. That's the quote I was looking for. Damaged goods after their failed, sanctimonious push and stupid $780 million settlement. He ends it with morons. Yeah, $780 million settlement. By the way, that's not good for the news industry overall. It tells you they were worried. They were really, really, really worried about other stuff coming out. And so they made that settlement because they didn't want other stuff to come out. But it's a bad precedent, frankly, for the First Amendment, for news organizations. If you're legitimately trying to cover something and you've got the likes of Rudy Giuliani or whoever, right? The president's lawyers coming out and saying X, Y, Z. It's hard to just say, okay, well, I'm going to completely ignore that. I would say that, and I think they did this, I'm not entirely certain, that if the company has come forward and they have a statement, right, Dominion, then it's sort of your obligation to also give the other side of the story. I'm not entirely sure whether they did that all the time. Anyway, we'll leave that aside, but I do think that he's making the point that you guys have run the place into the ground. Now, ratings are still okay. I don't think that Fox, over the next 20 years is where you want to be, at least as a shareholder. Let the family keep it, right? I don't know, is they're like keeping up with the changes in media, such as what we're doing here right now, what Tucker's doing over on Twitter. There is a whole new game in town, and it's a far more targeted one in terms of advertisers, because at some point during this show, you're going to hear something from an advertiser, whether it's me reading it, whether it's YouTube or Facebook inserting something, but it's more directly targeted to you, which is a very different medium than TV. TV will be around for a while. It's not like it's going away overnight, but the profitability of a company like Fox News is going to be challenged. The Wall Street Journal is the Wall Street Journal. I would say if he wants to protect that revenue stream in the future, I would actually try to go back to its roots and make it a little more FT and make it a little bit more special, as opposed to seeping in all your New York Post. Don't get me wrong, I love the New York Post, okay? Love it. It's fun paper to read. But the more of that's in the Wall Street Journal, the less you're going to be able to command as a price tag. And they do actually command a price, right? You have to pay for the Wall Street Journal. So there's lots of challenges and things coming forward that will make things harder and harder for Fox, for the Wall Street Journal, for these traditional media companies. And that's just the reality. So you got to think about it, right? As a shareholder, you got to think very, very carefully. I'm just going to check on shares today as we look at the market. A market that is trading at present higher right now. Let's see if I can pull up shares of Fox. It's traded under A and B, the family, of course, owning the A. Those are the better class shares, and it's doing okay. It's up 1.6%, $29 a share. That said, this company is not doing what it was. It had been up around, 33? Yeah, it had been up at least at 32 earlier in the spring. So in the last month, it's come under some pressure, and that does not surprise me. You know who else is coming under pressure? That would be our dear president. Our dear president making a fool of himself while insulting people in Vietnam. You see, his aides want him to somehow prove to the world that he's a spring chicken, of which we know he's not. And they're asking him to do things that at his age, he can't and really should not do, because they're increasingly showing his mental vulnerability and his physical vulnerability. You know this movie, right? There's a movie, a very, very famous movie about Vietnam. Robin Williams starred in it. Well, let me share.
Good morning, Vietnam! Hey, this is not a test. This is rock and roll.
All right, I gotta go back and watch that movie. Great, great, great movie. Anyway, Biden likes the movie, apparently, or one of his aides liked the movie. But keep in mind, right? People in Vietnam don't love that we were there as long as we were there. Vietnam was like just the beginning of sort of, I think, people's fatigue with war, the sense that we're just in war just to be in war, right? Like things really don't have an entire meaning. World War I, World War II, we got our heads around. But since then, since Vietnam, since some of these other things, it's been harder, right? The American people, that goodwill will only go so long. After 9/11, I think we were willing to do a lot to protect our country, protect our people. We understood that in Afghanistan. And then to be going into Iraq, for it all to be sort of kind of a ruse, and that really wasn't the story, right? Like that wasn't where they were going to find the terrorists from 9/11. They just kind of used that 9/11. They went into Iraq. And so people have kind of had it. Well, Vietnam was sort of the beginning of people having had it. And Vietnam had it. Like people don't really love being reminded that we were there, right? And yet what does Joe Biden do? It's the first thing he does when he gets up on stage. I'm going to play you this clip. It's very hard to understand and to hear, so I may translate a little bit for you. But take a listen.
It is evening, isn't it?
He says, it is evening, isn't it?
This around the world in 5 days is interesting.
This going around the world in 5 days is interesting.
Well, there's that, one of my staff members said, remember the famous song,
Well, there is
Good
that.
Morning, Vietnam.
My staff members said that famous movie, Good Morning, Vietnam.
Good morning.
And then he said, well, good evening, Vietnam. Right? Because he's like, it's evening, right? He can't say, good morning, Vietnam. Anyway, not smart. Not a great way to kind of introduce yourself there in Hanoi, Joe Biden, to remind them of a movie that was all about us being in Vietnam, Vietnam really not wanting us there, us really not really wanting to be there. Okay, great. But that wasn't like the end of it. He also had this little moment as soon as he got off the plane. He didn't seem to understand. He's like super, super confused. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, thank you. If you're not, make sure at the end of this show, I'm going to put the link in the show notes. I would love it if you would do me the favor of going over and subscribing to the full audio version of the show on Apple Podcasts. But I am going to show you right here, Joe Biden getting super confused as he's his first appearance here. He's just off the plane. He's trying to figure out this stage and just look at this look on his face. It's actually frightening because I think he's going downhill and he's going downhill fast. They even put these beams there for him, these rails for him to hold on to so he wouldn't fall, I guess, like he did in Japan. Anyway, watch. Okay. So yeah, he's slipping. And you know what? They should be a little worried about this. If you've seen older people who have the onset of dementia it can often come on actually very quickly. And that confusion, maybe not knowing where you are, sort of saying things that are out of line, those are signs that you got to be on the lookout for. And I hope they are. I hope they are. A few other stories I want to get to, including this breaking news that they have just, guess what? Approved. The FDA has approved a brand new vaccine. It's kind of funny because it comes on the heels of, pretty famous tennis player, Djokovic, who would not get the vaccine. Remember, it was a whole ordeal and he couldn't even play in the U.S. Open last year because he wouldn't get the vaccine. Well, this was the first year that you could play in the U.S. Open if you hadn't had the vaccine. And sure enough, he did. And the winning shot, ladies and gentlemen, I can't show it to you because they have all these rules around sports video. But the winning shot was none other than the Moderna shot because Moderna sponsored that particular shot. So of course, like that kind of was a sweet victory for those on social media that don't like Moderna or Big Pharma or vaccines. So here's the New York Post writing on it. And they did say that this was not lost, a moment that was not lost on social media users who watched the U.S. Open. This was Djokovic's first U.S. Open tournament appearance since the U.S. lifted the coronavirus vaccine regulations. Djokovic could not play in last year's tournament, of course, because he had not received the vaccine. So, wow. So very much a sweet victory there for him. But again, I want to point out there that they are coming forward with another vaccine. And a lot of people may be worried, may not be worried. I don't know. I think it's kind of a personal decision. Although we learned last time around, it wasn't so personal, right? Because your employer was requiring it and countries were requiring it. Trying to see if we have some sound here. We do. One of my former colleagues, actually over on Fox News, I was at Fox Business, but this is Megyn Kelly of Fox News, who now has her own program. She was talking about how she got the vaccine. And it really concerns her because she apparently got an autoimmune reaction to it. And, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know, right? Like I would just say, we don't know a whole lot about these things. We hope that vaccines would keep people safe. But I want to share with you what her reaction was and what her doctor said. Here she is on her program.
I regret getting the vaccine, even though I'm a 52-year-old woman, because I don't think I needed it. I think I would have been fine. I'd got COVID many times, and it was well past when the vaccine was doing what it was supposed to be doing. And then for the first time, I tested positive for an autoimmune issue at my annual physical. And I went to the best rheumatologist in New York, and I asked her, do you think this could have to do with the fact that I got the damn booster and then got COVID within 3 weeks? And she said, yes, I wasn't the only one she'd seen that with.
Okay, so that's alarming stuff, right? I mean, I think that we need to be able to have honest conversations about all of this. And one of our frustrations that I think that we all share together is that there is no honesty. I told you my story about getting the vaccine. I was traveling somewhere and I got the vaccine and I had a horrible reaction. And I kind of panicked and I'm online, we're doing all my research, right? And I actually go to a company that I used to work at, marketwatch.com. I go to marketwatch.com and they've got an article at the top of the page that is about a study about a Pfizer vaccine, because I'd gotten a Pfizer vaccine, that suggested there were some real complications you could have that could lead to stroke, et cetera. And it was a scientific study done by a university overseas. It was either Cambridge or Oxford, one of the two. I don't remember. And I knew the reporter that had done the story, again, because I used to work there. So I was like, oh, wow. So immediately I call my doctor and I run down to my husband's office because, we're all working at home back then. And I'm like panicked. I'm like, oh my gosh, because I'm feeling this, and this, and look at this study. And I went to show it to him and it was gone. I couldn't find it. It was no longer at the top of marketwatch.com. And I'm looking. And finally, I went and did a really detailed search because I knew the spelling of the reporter's name because he's a friend. I know him. I knew specifically whether it was Cambridge or Oxford. I don't remember now, but I knew exactly who had done the study. I knew the right search terms and eventually I found it. But you weren't easily finding this thing. And it had been wiped clean to the top of that website, which actually is owned by the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch now. And I was like, okay, well, that's alarming because I'm a smart enough person that I ought to be able to at least be able to read the study myself. Why would they want to hide it from me? And I called my doctor, and my doctor's like, okay, that's like 0.1%. I'm like, I know, but like, what if it's me, right? What if it's you? And these are questions that we ought to be able to at least ask. And I'm not saying, this whole idea of misinformation, disinformation, this, that, and the other. I think that we've got to get to a better place sooner rather than later because people do have real concerns and they ought to be able to weigh their chances and weigh their odds and understand those odds. And so if it's a 0.00001% chance that you're going to have something, a reaction, etc., okay, but like just know the 0.0001. Like don't try and hide it from us. We are sophisticated enough individuals. And when you start hiding things from us, like you've done, in fact, huge story over the weekend about that because the Biden administration is in fact in trouble for none other than hiding stuff. When you hide stuff like that, it becomes a problem. They were hiding the Joe Biden stuff. Remember, you couldn't say anything about the laptop. Well, that came out and it was in the appeals court. I think it's going all the way to the Supreme Court. We are going to see that indeed they have been hiding and they're going to continue hiding stuff. And it's not right. All right. I did mention Michelle Obama. We talked about this a little bit on Friday. Take a listen.
The allegations that have come out in the media in the last few weeks really were around for years. David Garrow's book that had the quote where Obama said he makes love to men in his imagination came out several years ago. And of course, Larry Sinclair was from way back in 2008. So the fact that these are coming to the surface tells you that I think there's something going on in Obama world. And I make the case that I believe that Joe Biden is on his way out. I think that's pretty much the consensus. Nobody really believes he'll be the candidate in 2024 because of health, because of corruption, because of his terrible record. And I make the case in my film and book that Michelle has been pretty much copying Barack Obama's path to the White House.
All right, so this is a guy who wrote this book, Michelle Obama, 2024. He wrote it back in 2022. And his thought is, there's no way that Joe Biden's going to make it. Like, there's just no way, right? He's failing on his health. He's got his son's disastrous record that perhaps it sounds like he might have had some involvement in. We've been talking about that a lot. And so if Michelle Obama runs, does she actually win it? He's making the point that all this junk is coming out right now. I mean, you saw Larry Sinclair. I'm going to play you a little clip. I just hate talking about this stuff. I mean, the world is so darn freaking seedy, right? Here is Larry Sinclair making some pretty bold accusations against Obama on Tucker Carlson's show.
We get back in the limo. The driver takes us wherever it is that Barack had instructed him to take us. I had given Barack $250 to pay for Coke. He gets out, comes back. I start putting a line on a CD tray to snort.
And you're in the limo.
Yep.
Driving or parked?
No.
Okay, by the way, it gets worse. I'm going to leave it there. You guys can watch it if you want, but pretty seedy stuff involving homosexuality and drugs and da-da-da. Anyway, so some people are speculating, why is this all coming out right now? Is it because Michelle Obama is going to run in 2024? Are they trying to send a warning or something? Look, I would just say this. I know a lot of you disagree. In fact, I was looking at some of the commentary over the weekend. Curious, let me know what you think in the comments right now, actually, given it's a live show, or if you want to put in the comments below if you're watching after the fact. Do you think she would be a real threat? I think I get it. So many of you are like, okay, she's a real threat because of the system, because of the establishment. But I'm just going to say, like, as a candidate, I don't see her as a real threat. I see her as like manna from heaven for Donald Trump because she is so incredibly unlikable. She is so incredibly unlikable. And I covered Barack Obama's campaigns in 2008. And of course, the 2012 as well. I ran all the political coverage at Bloomberg at that time. They were hiding her. Like in the basement, like they had to do Biden, right? Like they did not want her out and about because every time she spoke, she just stepped in it over and over. She was insulting. She was insulting our country. She was insulting our ability to get along. I mean, all this divisiveness, this race stuff, this all came, I'm sorry, but it came initially with the Obamas. Like we had worked through a lot of this stuff. Heck, we elected him, right? If we were a racist country, really think that we're going to elect a black man for president. So we had kind of like turned the corner on this, and whoa, it all came back in spades. She was a big part of that. And they actually used to hide her away. They didn't want her being seen. So I hear you in that, yeah, she's clued in, the establishment likes her, and she would be threatening from that perspective. But in terms of the people, I think actually she's got a lot of negativity, more than Hillary Clinton, if you can imagine that. And consequently, she would not be extremely welcomed. You know, all these people that are sort of in this Hollywood circuit, I think America has grown increasingly just sort of tired of, right? And Hillary's one of them. The Obamas are certainly one of them. Hey, look, Spotify had to end their deal with Michelle and Barack because guess what? It didn't rate. Speaking of confused, annoying, entitled Hollywood people, Ashton Kutcher, or whatever his name is, and Mila Kunis, these are some people left over from that 70s show. They've actually become big stars. You know that show? Did you ever watch it? I'm just showing you a clip. I have to take out the sound again because music rules. But anyway, the 70s show was a popular little thing that actually featured quite a few now very big stars like Mila Kunis, Ashton Kutcher. I'm still not saying his name right. Anyway, they had another guy, Danny, who is in a lot of trouble right now. And what's interesting is that Mila and Ashton Kutcher came out with sort of a letter to the judge to help their friend Danny Masterson deal with what would be the sentence, which could be up to 30 years for 2 rapes that I guess he's been convicted of having done, and it's not pretty stuff. But Mila and Ashton, who have been all about sort of the Me Too thing, they came out with a video because they have to apologize because somehow it got leaked to a reporter, an independent journalist who published their letters, and people are like, wait a second, aren't you guys like all about women and all about victims? And so why would you defend this guy? And the people are right. Like, this is a couple of Hollywood actors that want to have it both ways. They want to be out there saying the PC stuff that gets them hired, while simultaneously they're trying to do something good for their friend. And you just have to say, okay, well, at some point, guys, you got to draw a line in the sand, right? You cannot be all things to all people. You got to stand for something. Here's their apology, which, by the way, like shows it's so contrived. It's so fake. They're trying to make it seem real, but you can tell that they scripted this out, especially with her, especially when she starts. It's not impromptu. It's been practiced. It's been scripted. And it makes me think they're lousy actors. Watch.
We are aware of the pain that has been caused by the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson.
We support victims. We have done this historically through our work and will continue to do so in the future.
A couple months ago, Danny's family reached out to us and they asked us to write character letters to represent the person that we knew for 25 years so that the judge could take that into full consideration relative to the sentencing.
The letters were not written to question the legitimacy of the judicial system or the validity of the jury's ruling.
They were intended for the judge to read and not.
He's doing a better job.
The victims or re-traumatize them in any way. We would never want to do that. And we're sorry if that has taken place.
Our heart goes out to every single person who's ever been a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse, or rape.
Dun, dun, done. Okay, so now you're forgiven. That's what you think. Well, you know what? I'm not the only one that picked up on this. Even the Hollywood media is noticing how contrived it was. This is from Variety. They said the video itself is a bizarre document of contemporary fame. Both stars are in just woke up level wrinkled t-shirts with Kutcher unshaven and bedraggled. If the aim was to present us with a frank dose of Ashton and Mila letting us into their world, it missed the mark. I agree. The results seem to bear the self-conscious drama of 2 people who feel compelled to create their own hostage video. Yeah. Okay, but it gets worse. It gets worse because it seems they used to be okay with this kind of highly sexualized behavior. It used to be just fine, like back in the day. There's this clip of the 2 of them on Rosie O'Donnell's show. I'm sorry. Yeah. Rosie. I don't think you see much of her in it. It's a short clip. It's been seen already, just like within the last 24 hours, some 4 million times. I'm going to play it here for you.
What's funny is when she was 14 when we started the show. I was like 19, right?
Right.
And they're like, okay, you guys are going to be making out in this scene. And I'm like thinking like, wait, this is like slightly illegal,
that's
right?
probably your first kiss ever, right?
It was my first kiss. What if someone bet you made with Danny
14
about our
years
first
old.
kiss?
No, it wasn't the first kiss.
No,
It was like
go
the
ahead,
second or
Ashley.
She
third
said she got
kiss.
her first kiss.
It was like the first week.
No, it was not the first week.
Whatever. Let me tell you what
And
happened.
that Danny made a bet with him.
No. Okay, I've never kissed a guy. I was so. I mean, Ash was attractive, and I was a 14-year-old little girl, and I was extremely scared for my life.
Sure.
And he was very nice about it. He was like, "Oh, don't worry." So I was like,
Okay, so blah, blah, blah.
Then
It turns
Danny
out
goes
like
and goes,
Danny somehow made a bet with Ashton, $10, if you kiss her with tongue or something. I don't want to get into it. But the point being that, yes, the world has changed. And these two seem to know that it's changed. And yet maybe it really hasn't changed, right? Because they're out there writing these character letters for their friend, which I understand it's their friend. But then as soon as somebody finds out about it, they put on their little woke t-shirts and they go and do this little video that's clearly been scripted and they memorize lines to try and tell the world they're sorry. Well, guess what? You know what? I never bought you in the beginning and I'm not buying you now. And I'm really tired of Hollywood wanting to have it both ways, always. I'm tired of the Democrats that are so in bed with Hollywood wanting to have it both ways, always their way. Like private jets are out. Unless, of course, it's John Kerry, who's our climate czar, who has to take one so he can go claim an award for all the great work he's done on climate. That is a problem. Anyway, if you have not subscribed to the show, do me that favor. Make sure you subscribe right there below. It's great having you all here. I know so many of you now. We've gotten to know each other because you're wonderful. You're joining this show regularly every day. We're here Monday through Friday, live, sometimes even on the weekend. Yep. So I love seeing you all and appreciate you. I just want to go out to some of your comments. I do read all of these and I read them in the notes below as well. So if you want to leave one there. But anyway, Mike O'Donnell's become a very familiar face to all of us here. So good to see you. Yeah, you have some thoughts on that whole Danny thing as well. Anyway, Renee, good to see you again. Eric, good having you here. Sharon, too. Look, it's great. It's great to see all you guys. And I encourage you to go over, check out the audio podcast. It helps me. It actually helps me a lot if you subscribe to that. It's all free. So we are sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals, legacypminvestments.com, 1-866-589-0560. You might have seen me say that at the top of the show. We'll get into some more of the economic stuff tomorrow because there's a lot going on that you just need to be aware of that I think we have to talk about. But this Rupert Murdoch versus Donald Trump scenario, modern day duel, it's interesting. And I think I know who would win. What do you think? We'll talk tomorrow.